When it comes to Rent a Girlfriend, it truly is a unique piece of entertainment. I feel like Rent a Girlfriend has cemented itself and is going to be remembered for all the wrong reasons. Rent a Girlfriend truly is a series that is nothing but a dumpster fire. But it's a dumpster fire that at first I feel people did not really care, because it's one of those it's so bad it's good that you just couldn't stop reading it or watching the anime when it first came out. But as time went by, people started to realize that Rent a Girlfriend was just a giant waste of time. There is no character development, nothing really changes throughout the story, and for those who were reading the manga, the more new chapters that came out, the more of the same thing happens, which is nothing at all. And it got so bad to the point that there are some people who really just stopped reading the chapters and just simply waited for people to just post a summary as to what the new chapter had to offer. And then there's some people who just stopped reading this completely, and when they decide to come back to it, they realize that nothing has progressed and everything is still the same thing. And at this point, you would think that Rent a Girlfriend would be something from the past. People would just stop making fun of it, because at this point there's no point of just trashing this series, since everyone knows that this series is not good. But no matter what, some way and somehow Rent a Girlfriend, for as bad as it is, always manages to have a moment that has a lot of people talking and gets the internet talking. And it was no exception quite recently, because all it took is just one chapter to really make people realize that a story can get much worse as it continues. And chapter 380 was that case, because when I say that the timeline exploded as soon as this chapter was released and people found out what it was all about, once again Rent a Girlfriend was in the spotlight, and once again many people were proven as to why you should not waste your time reading this. Because in chapter 380 we get the reveal that Chizuru, while she does have some sort of feelings for Kazuya, despite this revelation, she ultimately decides to reject him, making this one of the most frustrating and baffling moments in Rent a Girlfriend. This also was that chapter that really made people think differently of Chizuru, because I think at this point, many people, for the most part, just really did not like Kazuya. That goes for myself as well. Kazuya is probably one of the worst protagonists in any series of all time. I think Kazuya was always doomed from the start, the moment he was introduced, because from the very beginning Kazuya just came off as a massive loser who did not know how to behave or react whenever he was close to a girl. And while this is passable in a high school setting, this is not the case, because Kazuya is in his college years and by this point is already an adult, so the fact that an adult still has no idea how he should behave or react when he's close to girls is pretty weird. And not to mention, just Kazuya's personality as a whole really just sucks. But if you've been keeping up with Rent a Girlfriend, I think you noticed by now. However, on the other hand, this chapter, when it came to how Chizuru was portrayed, really did make you look back at the previous things that happened in Rent a Girlfriend, and it really made you realize that Chizuru is not that great of a person either. The fact that just the previous chapter before this confession, this being chapter 379, Chizuru opened up to Kazuya, revealing how she truly felt about him, how she enjoyed spending time with him, how she did not regret all those moments that she had with him, how thanks to him she was able to create memories that she will never forget, and how during her toughest times she was never alone, because he was always right there if she ever needed help. And when she's saying all this, you're thinking to yourself, oh, are they finally going to pull the trigger and make this a confession that, even though it should have been done sooner, is going to be something that does make some sort of progress to the story? And it made you think that, and then next thing you know, the next chapter comes and Chizuru decides that despite her realizing that she had feelings for Kazuya, despite her realizing that Kazuya is somebody that was always there for her, after all that realization, it was for nothing, because she still chose to reject him. And the reason behind it is even more stupid, because the reason why Chizuru decided to reject Kazuya is because she still wants to live her lifestyle that she has right now, which is of course being a rental girlfriend. And the reason why this is not a great look for Chizuru is because she prefers having this job as a rental girlfriend, a job that, let me remind you, isn't going to last long, because it's not a job that anybody is going to be able to do forever. But this also just makes Chizuru seem like she'd rather have a life that's filled with fake relationships rather than having a real one where it isn't artificial but it's actually genuine. And what makes this moment even more frustrating is the fact that even though I'm not one of those people who reads Rent a Girlfriend weekly, I'm not looking forward to the new chapter chapters because I just know it's going to be just a huge disappointment and just really going to be a complete waste of my time. But there are people out there who legitimately did read this series on a weekly basis. There are people who had some hope for whatever reason that there was going to be some development as the story continues, that even after all the terrible writing decisions, even after seeing that clearly the author is milking this series to the ground, maybe, just maybe, something truly good does happen. But after this, I think anybody, even if you're a huge fan of Rent a Girlfriend, I think by now you should come to a realization that this is not a good story. There's nothing that's going to save it from being called one of the worst romance stories of all time. And I feel like Rent a Girlfriend is going to be used in the near future. Once it comes to an end, although who knows when that's going to happen, it's going to be used as a case study as to how not to write not just a romance story, but how to not write a story as a whole. If there's anybody out there who plans on being a future mangaka and you want to know how you should not write a story, just go look at Rent a Girlfriend. Now, I know there's going to be some people out there who are going to try to justify or try to defend this moment by saying that this is not a huge deal because it's kind of realistic in real life. And while that is true, that even though a confession isn't always going to have a happy ending, even if there is that possibility that things may work out, for some people it may be too much and they may not really want to form a relationship yet when they haven't really solved all their issues that they have personally. And I get that, that's perfectly fine. I don't mind when stories have that kind of approach because yes, it could be grounded, it could be realistic, and those are the kind of romance series that can be remembered for trying to do something different and not trying to be just like the other hundreds of romance series that use the same formula. But the problem with Rent a Girlfriend is that for many chapters, for who knows how many arcs, there's been so many moments in which Chizuru has contemplated if she really does like Kazuya or does she not. Should she really have a relationship with him, and is this even okay at all considering her job as a rental girlfriend, since it's been established that rental girlfriends are prohibited from actually forming real life relationships with their clients. But even though Chizuru has been following up with this rule, maybe she's willing to throw it all away just to be with Kazuya. It's because of these moments that make people believe that there is something that's going to happen in the future. There is a possibility that maybe Kazuya and Chizuru will be a couple, and that's going to be where the story ends. But after this chapter, there may be a possibility where that doesn't even happen at all, and it just makes Chizuru look like somebody that just likes to play with people's feelings and not be 100% honest with them or tell them right away that they are disinterested in them, and will give them hope that there's a possibility that something may happen between them and her, only for her to instantly tell them how she truly feels, making everything that happened before not really matter at all anymore. And while this chapter did make Chizuru look worse, it doesn't mean that Kazuya came out good in this, because he too also sucks in this chapter, because after being rejected, instead of just simply realizing that Chizuru is just simply somebody not worth going after anymore and making the decision to just cut ties with her as this could be a way to better his life and just simply move forward, he just simply decides to respond this rejection by saying that's life, and then trying to cheer up Chizuru after she rejected him. Just when you thought that Kazuya couldn't be even more of a loser, he decides to say all that, and it just makes him look so bad, because instead of putting his foot down, just telling Chizuru why did she take so long to finally tell him all this, why didn't she just say it sooner rather than later. Had he done something that he showed Chizuru that he was just done with her, it could have made me think maybe this will be the moment that Kazuya does grow up. Maybe he's going to grow mature and come to the realization that no matter how nice you are to somebody, and no matter how many good things you do for someone, that person may not do it in return, and they may just take it for granted, giving him the harsh realization that love and relationships are not an easy thing, and that just because you love someone, that person may not love you back, or while they may have feelings for you, they may not just feel ready, or they don't feel like it's a good idea to be together. But no, instead we just get another moment that just proves everybody's point as to why Kazuya is one of the worst protagonists in the romance genre. And this just added another reason as to why we shouldn't feel bad for Kazuya, because instead of learning from these experiences, you just know full well that he's just going to try harder and think that he still has a chance with Chizuru, even though those chances always become lower and lower whenever something like this happens. And even when the time comes when Chizuru and Kazuya, for whatever reason or somehow they do end up together, it's not going to feel special. It's just going to feel forced. It's going to feel like really just not that great of a decision after everything that happened between Kazuya and Chizuru, and it's just going to be happening just for the sake of happening. And this is primarily the reason as to why I don't really feel bad for any of these two people. Both Chizuru and Kazuya did so many bad decisions and had such very bad character moments that you are just left to wonder, should you really be rooting for these people? Kazuya had somebody else, this being Ruka, who genuinely did like him, and there were many moments in which she was patient and she was hopeful that maybe Kazuya would change and just go out with the girl that truly did like him and actually wanted to be in a relationship. But that doesn't happen, and he decides to just fumble on that and still go after the girl. That makes it obvious that her feelings towards him are very conflicted and all over the place. And then we have Chizuru, somebody who we come to learn through this story has not had an easy life and has had to struggle to get where she's at. It becomes annoying seeing her be a walking contradiction, because one moment she could be perfectly fine with Kazuya and be comfortable being next to him, and the next thing you know, she has her moments in which she's trying to be distant and doesn't want to have an actual connection with Kazuya, making this will they won't they become an annoying part of the story, because you just know this is just a way to stretch the story more further and to make even more arcs and to make even more chapters and make more volumes until the end of time. And that is the reason why Rent-a-Girlfriend is not a good romance story. The point of romance stories and the reason why they're loved so much by many people is because we love seeing two people who at first maybe they don't have feelings for one another, but as time goes on and the time that they spend with one another becomes frequent, then we see something blossom, and the next thing you know, they're trying to overcome their personal issues, they're trying to overcome their personal struggles, and then later on we see them come to realize that as long as they have each other, they'll be able to not only take the next step, but will be able to overcome anything that's being thrown at them. And when the time is right and you see a confession being made, it's more special when you see the growth of these characters, how far they've come and just how much they have changed since the beginning of the story. Which is why when it comes to love confessions, while it's something that's bound to happen in any romance series, if done right, it could be one of the most memorable moments of that series, and it's going to have a lot of people talking about it till this day. But with Rent-a-Girlfriend and what this love confession did, not only hurt two of its main characters, but it also just demonstrated people that nothing is going to change in the story of Rent-a-Girlfriend. If this was a story about two young adults learning what love truly is and what it means to actually form a relationship, then maybe this would have been something special. But we know deep down that this is not the case, because the author has made it now very clear that there is no progress in this story. There isn't going to be a moment that's going to make you want to read this story weekly, and that's something that, while unfortunate, that is the reality. And with new chapters still being created and with new volumes still being made, and not to mention that the anime still keeps getting seasons, the way the author of Rent-a-Girlfriend writes his story is not going to change, because, well, there seems to be a demand for more Rent-a-Girlfriend. Even if there is no story and even if everyone makes fun of it, there is still a handful of people that are still invested in Rent-a-Girlfriend. And at the time of recording this video, chapter 381 has come out, and no surprise, the quote-unquote story between Chizuru and Kazuya isn't coming to an end, making the cycle repeat itself. And I wouldn't be surprised if in the near future we're going to have another crazy Rent-a-Girlfriend moment that's going to have a lot of people from the anime and manga community talking. And now the only question that's up in the air is if there's ever going to be another moment that's going to be as bad as this love confession in chapter 380. And with that, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.